It's a mad loaded question. But what makes a person difficult?
Yeah, so I think that there are some fundamental things that make people difficult in general. I think it can be subjective as well though, because let's say you have conflicting
100%.
personality types. Of course, you might find someone difficult that someone else might not find them difficult, right?
So sometimes difficult people can, quote unquote, difficult people can tend to be quite victimized, and they think, oh, it's everyone else, it's everyone else.
You want to have mutual respect with people that you're working with, whether it's
Yeah.
a colleague, a client. Respect is the absolute bare minimum. Think about yourself in that moment.
The earth is flat. What did you mean? What do you mean by that? That's an extreme example. That is an extreme
such
example.
a random example. I mean something that hurts you, T. You know what I mean?
That hurts me.
You know,
The earth is round, Linda.
I think that the HubSpot department is really bad at red pandas. Imagine me saying that.
What do you mean?
Exactly. That's what we're talking about. Navigating conversations and relationships with difficult people.
Welcome to the Marketing Mentors podcast, brought to you by Red Pandas Digital. I am Tasha, and of course joined by the one and only lovely Linda. And what Linda just said there was pretty exciting. Say it again.
Yeah, so today we're talking about predominantly working with difficult people.
Oh, yeah.
And we've all worked with someone who's been difficult. And we're going to talk about what exactly makes a difficult person, because it can feel quite subjective. But yeah, we're talking about how to work and manage relationships with difficult people.
Yeah, we are talking about our co-workers and colleagues here, because I'm sure when I say difficult person, we can all think of 1, 2, 3, maybe most of our personal relationships, so outside of work. But yeah, we're not, look, you could definitely use some of the stuff we're going to share today. You could definitely use these with anyone in your life, because at the end of the day, we're all humans, right? And we all just want to be spoken to nicely and have, empathy and emotion towards each other, right? But ultimately, we're talking about at work and dealing with what we might call, quote unquote, difficult people at work. I would love for us to start with, and you said this before, it's a mad loaded question, but what makes a person difficult?
Yeah, so I think that there are some fundamental things that make people difficult in general. I think it can be subjective as well though, because let's say you have conflicting
100%.
personality types. Of course, you might find someone difficult that someone else might not find them difficult, right? So there is just subjective things here with personality clashes. But in saying that as well, there are definitely fundamental things that can just make the average person more difficult to just be around and work with. I think number one is their communication, particularly if they're passive aggressive, if they're indirect, if they're not clear with their communication. Being difficult to just have everyday communication with, that's going to be a hard thing to overcome.
Yeah, and I think we've all worked with, we are so blessed here at Red Pandas, because we all do a lot of introspective work around being better communicators, raising our own levels of self-awareness. So this is not coming from a place of what we go through, I think, as colleagues, but we've seen it with people that have come into the team and haven't been at the same level as us. Let's just say communication is the example.
Yeah.
And the way that they thought, which was maybe communicating in an honest and radically candid point of view, actually wasn't for, the majority of a business.
Yeah.
And so that communication trait in their eyes may not have been poor for themselves. We've got to remember that, everyone perceives themselves how they want to. But for our standard and the way that we were working, it was a poor communication for being radically candid. So being, high caring and direct with what you're saying.
Yeah, there's having the ability, which I agree we do quite well, which is being able to introspectively look in and assess how you communicate. I also think as well it's bred from the experiences that they would have had in their past workplace. For example, maybe they've come from a workplace where they didn't communicate very well and they never received feedback that their communication style was poor or that they would be passive aggressive or indirect, whatever it is. And so they've not become known from external people that really it would have been their duty to have that conversation with that person and let them know. But if they haven't had that before, then I can understand as well it would be quite difficult to kind of meet the same expectation.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like that leads us into another point which can be a contribution as to what makes someone difficult, and that is their past experiences. So obviously poor communication, and we're talking, like you were saying before, you've got being direct, passive aggressive, not loud enough, whatever it is, right? Whatever your definition of poor communication is. And then there's this past experiences element.
Yeah.
Like you said, in a previous role, maybe they didn't have radical candor with their team. Maybe they weren't given feedback. Maybe they just worked in silos and no one really talked to each other. And so joining a team of people was a huge shock, because it's like that's not normally how they're, conditioned to working with. And then like if you want to get like really deep on it, if you don't have a good level of understanding of yourself or self-awareness, you really struggle to see past the fact that it's not a them problem, it's a you problem.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So sometimes difficult people can, quote unquote, difficult people can tend to be quite victimized.
Yeah.
And they think, oh, it's everyone else, it's everyone else.
Yeah.
And if that's the attitude, that's a pretty big indicator that it's actually not. It is you, and you need to put that mirror on yourself and take a good hard look at yourself and realize there's some self-awareness and stuff you need to figure out.
You've just got to look at the common denominators.
That's it. Yeah, that's it.
But you're right. It's self-awareness, being able to look at that. I feel like maybe this is more of a subjective one for me personally.
I agree.
I've found that, and like in addition to like I've found for me personally, I feel like when I'm working with someone who doesn't have a growth mindset, when they are very closed mind, not open to new ideas, for me personally, I know I find that really, really difficult to work with. If they are completely shut off from doing something a different way than they have always done it in the past.
Yeah.
And this isn't just colleagues, like I'm thinking like previous clients that we've worked with, things like that. And that could be, again, a subjective one there. I'm conscious of that because perhaps not every company is looking for employees that have,
it's probably
all growth
subjective to
mindsets.
difficult people, right?
Yeah. Nice.
Not us growth mindset, undifficult people, of course. Look, each to their own. I think one key thing that, Dale Carnegie talks about heaps in his How to Win Friends, Influence People is like you just got to be careful when you're working with people, right? People are emotional. We're very, very emotional beings. I know I'm super emotional, so I try to work on my own self-awareness constantly when I hear things or people say things to me, or when I'm feeling certain things, especially at work. It's like, is that me just being like emotional?
Yeah.
And, or is this a valid reaction or something that I'm like, I need to process and work through? I will always stand by if your initial reaction is probably the wrong reaction. So whatever you're feeling initially when something happens or when something's going on, just kind of sit with it for a bit. Try not to be so reactive emotionally. Reactive emotionally is only really good when your life's at danger, I feel like. But we won't go down that. We're going to go on a tangent.
Yeah.
We'll come back to what makes a person difficult, right?
You know what? I think for you,
Thank
if
you.
I can say,
please.
you know what? I think if there was something subjective for you, T, that maybe you'd find more difficult than maybe your average person, I think it's people that have low energy or like bad energy, because you're very high energy.
Yeah, possibly.
So I feel like if you're in a room with like, let's call it like a Dementor from Harry Potter, right? Someone that's just like sucks the life out of. Yeah. I feel like you would struggle with that maybe a little bit more because you are so high energy.
Yeah, I tend to just like bugger off from them. I don't give them a time of day. Yeah. Because it's just like, why are you so depressed? Yeah. Very subjective. Yeah. But I think you can be low energy and still have growth mindset and totally, achieve things and, be a great contributor, team player type of thing. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. But I do like high energy. High energy, attracts high energy. So yeah, no, you're spot on. Yeah. There's another thing here for what makes a person difficult, and we've got lack of empathy. I like this one. I feel like if someone doesn't have empathy or empathetic skills, they're going to be difficult because they're only thinking about themselves. Yeah. Right? Empathy is to think about someone else.
The way that you cope and you like work with difficult people is through empathy.
Exactly.
So if there's absolutely none, it's going to make it really, really hard. Yeah. Because I think kind of like when you start to talk solutions when it comes to like how to actually work with them, I feel like the best way to do that is through empathy and just being human to human and getting really good at understanding that person. And I think you do this really, really well, T, to be fair. Being able to like just understand the person on a personal level, not in a work level, and having that empathy towards them and their life and the experiences that they've gone through, I think helps you be able to work with someone because you understand them on a deeper level in that way, you know?
Yeah, you're seeking to understand them rather than seeking to be understood.
Yeah.
But often, again, difficult people are trying to be understood. They're misunderstood. So the minute someone gives them some empathy and tries to understand them, they'll take it. They'll take it. They'll take it. They'll take it.
Yeah.
And then you have people that are like high energy and want to feed off of that stuff, that it does end up being like dementorish and draining. So it's this incredible balance between, and this has been the challenge and the absolute pleasure of becoming a leader is learning how to balance that empathy and energy for my team, but also preserve myself, because I need to look after myself, right? We were talking about this before. I've got to go home to a husband and child and 2 dogs. It's one of my dog's birthdays today, by the way.
No way.
Yeah, he's 6, Bobo.
Shout out to Bobo.
Go on his Instagram, @BoboEllieJugs. Thanks. Go give him a follow.
They've got more followers than Tasha.
100% they do. They're way cuter. But there's this, this empathy skill that is so needed for leaders. Yeah. And if we're working with difficult people, like we say, assume positive intent, seek to understand, listen, coaching principles. So lots of questions without being like interrogative. But I find that to be really helpful with like working with working with someone that can be seen as difficult.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it makes it easier, definitely. Because you want to have mutual respect with people that you're working with, whether it's a colleague, a client. Respect is the absolute bare minimum. They don't have to like you. You don't necessarily have to like them. But, of course, it makes it easier if you like each other and respect each other at the same time. They, of course, don't have to mutually work together, but it's easier that way. And I think the only way that you can establish that likability is by being empathetic and just being a human. Yeah. Like you say, understanding the person, being a good listener, understanding what they're going through.
Or trying to, right? Seek to understand them.
Yeah. But I think a lot of, let's say leaders, managers, whatever, miss that step sometimes. Mm-hmm. They go straight to the, mutual respect and straight to the job, but they kind of miss that likability component, which then makes it difficult if you down the track realize you're then working with a difficult person and you don't quite understand them.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. All the books, all the best self-help books talk about this concept of empathy, seeking to understand rather than to be understood.
Yeah.
Listening, having empathy. Like, don't be the person that's taking up all the space in the room with the speaking. Yes, you can have a great energy. Yeah. And I do have a great energy, and I can take up the room with all the talking. I've got no issues doing that. Yeah. But I also am so aware of making sure that if it's my team member that I'm trying to build a rapport with and build that connection, potentially work with them if they're a little bit difficult, I just let them talk. I let them talk and to the point where either I find something that I know could be contributing to why some people might see them as difficult, or that's something that sometimes they just need to get off their chest. Again, fine line between I'm not your therapist, and I've got to go home to my family at the end of the day. So where do I draw that line? And it's when I've had to deal with difficult people that don't know how to cross, like they don't know how to stop at that line. That's when it's been too difficult. Yeah, because I'm not a therapist, so I'm not going to deal with someone's severe mental health issues. Yeah, there are professionals out there that can do that. Do you know what I mean? Blurring some lines here, right? But yeah. I think it's just letting people talk, being able to be available to them.
It's a really good point though, T. Like that overflow into your personal life when dealing with difficult people. I mean, we all have to do it, right? Yeah. And we all have to suck it up. But you're right. There is a line between going through that as a manager, a leader, a colleague, whatever it is, a partner, like in business, but then being conscious that doesn't flow over, because the last thing that you want is to get into a routine of trying to deal with that in the best way that you can, but then not giving your all to your family when you get home.
You have to know. And I think it's still something, Linda, that I'm still trying to learn how to deal with. Yeah. Because I'm such a good listener, people put a lot of stuff on me. Yeah. I think
you ask a lot of great questions.
I do, yeah.
I think that's why you're a good question asker. That's your strength there, yeah.
But then I also am so emotional that I'll take on some of that emotional load for them. So they feel great after talking to me, and often I'm just like, whoa. Yeah, why do I feel like
you've got to deal with that now.
Exactly, I've got to deal with it. So that's my own kind of like, I'm becoming that difficult person for someone else in my life because I'm taking on too much of others. So that's something I'm learning. I'm getting through it. I think even just talking about it is a really nice processing mechanism. Thank you.
That's good.
But
our own therapy session.
Yeah, 100%. That's what today's topic is.
Yeah.
But I do want us to kind of go to a few strategies.
Yeah.
So we just spoke about being a good listener, having check-ins. Like that's what I've worked on with, quote unquote, difficult people in the past. But there's some other things as well that we picked up in How to Win Friends, Influence People, which have been really helpful. I feel like I'll start with give the other person a fine reputation to live up to. So that was one of his principles for, I can't remember the exact reference, but do you want to tell me a little bit about this one, Linda?
Yeah. So the best example that I can kind of think of here is, so give the other person a fine reputation to live up to. So let's say you have a working relationship with someone, maybe it's a client, for example. They are known to be a difficult communicator. They're not very clear in their communication, right? By opening up the conversation by saying, and of course there's a way in doing this to not make it seem so cheesy and direct, right? But by opening up the conversation by saying, hey, like, funny, we're talking right now. I was actually talking about you with a colleague, and they were just saying like what a wonderful person you are and how like easy it is to be able to communicate with you. We always get the best briefs from you. And then knowing later in that conversation that there's going to be a time where you're going to need that communication from them, by setting that reputation or that standard, they're able to psychologically go back to that and think, you know what, perhaps I might, and it's all subconscious, but they might then feel the need to kind of live up to that reputation.
As human beings, we're wired that way. Do you know what I mean? We're wired to, and
we want to impress.
We want to impress. We want to do good. We're not innately horrible people that don't want to perform. Do you know what I mean? And if you're working with a professional in their space and you use little things like that, like and